She walked across that boardroom like she owned every square inch of it, because she did. Diana Voss, CEO of Voss Agronomic Group, $4 billion in annual revenue, the kind of woman who made senators wait in the lobby. She pulled out the chair next to Marcus Webb. A black single father who smelled like motor oil and honest work sat down on his lap, pressed her hand flat against his chest, and said 4 words into his ear that stopped every conversation in the room cold. "Kiss me. He's watching." Marcus Webb had not been touched by a woman in 4 years. He had not expected today to be the day that changed. Neither had she. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell. This one goes all the way. The envelope sat on Marcus Webb's kitchen table for 3 days before he opened it. It wasn't that he was afraid of it. Marcus Webb, 52 years old, former structural engineer turned owner-operator of Webb & Sons Agricultural Services in Decatur, Georgia, was not a man who was afraid of paper. He had signed divorce papers without flinching. He had signed his wife's death certificate 4 years later because the divorce had been a formality, and the death had been the real ending, and he had not flinched at that either, at least not while the pen was in his hand. Mount. He hadn't opened the envelope because his son Darius, 9 years old, had walked through the door that same afternoon with a split lip and a story that took 2 hours to fully understand, and by the time it was understood and addressed, and the ice pack had done its work, Marcus had forgotten the envelope existed. By the second day, he had remembered it but chosen the tractor engine instead. Third day, he chose it over the engine. The return address said Voss Agronomic Group, Atlanta, Georgia. The logo was clean and dark green, the kind of logo that cost money to design. Inside was a single page on heavy stock and a business card. The letter was 4 paragraphs. The business card had one name on it: Diana Voss, Chief Executive Officer. The letter said that Voss Agronomic Group had been tracking independent agricultural service operations across the Southeast for 18 months. It said that Webb & Sons had been flagged for what it called consistent accuracy in soil remediation reporting and above benchmark crop recovery rates in post-drought conditions. It said the company was interested in a preferred vendor partnership and was hosting a regional partner summit at the Emory Conference Center in 2 weeks. And then at the bottom below the signature, someone had written by hand, not printed, actually written in blue ink. Your 2022 Drought Recovery Report on the Whitmore parcel was the most honest document we received from any independent operator in the state. We would like to meet you. Marcus read that line 3 times. Not because he was flattered, because he was trying to figure out what it cost a person to write that. Most people in business didn't say honest. They said thorough or comprehensive or data-driven. Honest was a different word. Honest meant they had read enough dishonest ones to know the difference. He set the card on the table. He picked it up. He set it down again. "Dad!" Darius was in the doorway in his pajamas, the split lip yellowing at the edges into a bruise. "Are you coming to bed?" "In a minute." "You said that an hour ago." "I know what I said." Darius leaned against the doorframe and studied his father the way 9-year-olds study their parents when they sense something is happening that they don't have language for yet. "Is that letter bad?" he asked. "No," Marcus said. "Is it good?" Marcus looked at the card. "I don't know yet." He stood up and put the card in his shirt pocket. "Go to sleep, D." He drove to Atlanta on a Wednesday morning in his F250 with the Webb & Sons logo on the side door, fresh washed but not repainted. He had been meaning to repaint it for 2 years and had not gotten around to it because there was always something more necessary than the paint. He wore the charcoal gray suit he kept in the back of the closet for situations that required it. Darius had told him at breakfast that he looked like an important person, which was the most encouraging thing anyone had said to him in recent memory. The Voss Agronomic Group office occupied the top 3 floors of a building in Midtown that had a lobby with actual art on the walls, not prints, not framed motivational quotes, actual paintings. Marcus noticed because he noticed things. He had been noticing things his whole life as a form of self-preservation, learning to read rooms before rooms could decide what they thought of him. The receptionist was polite and professional and asked him twice if he had an appointment with a particular kind of careful courtesy that said she was uncertain whether to take him at his word. "Marcus Webb," he said the second time. "Webb and Sons. I have a 10 o'clock with Ms. Voss." "Of course." She said it the way people say of course when they are embarrassed that they doubted. "I'll let her assistant know you're here." He sat in a chair by the window and looked at Atlanta from the 14th floor and thought about the Whitmore parcel, about 3 weeks in August 2022, when the drought had cracked the topsoil on 400 acres, and he had driven out there every morning at 5 and taken cores and run numbers and written a report that said plainly that the soil recovery would take 18 months minimum and that anyone who told the Whitmore family differently was lying to them for the sake of a contract. He had lost the Whitmore contract over that report. The company that got it had promised 9-month recovery and delivered 22 months of mediocre yield and one lawsuit. Marcus had heard about the lawsuit from a neighbor and had felt something that was not quite satisfaction, but was in the same county. "Mr. Webb." He stood before he had consciously decided to stand. Diana Voss was not what he had constructed in his head on the 2-hour drive. He had constructed someone architectural severe lines, expensive distance the particular armor that women in her position often wore, because they had learned they needed to wear it. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a white shirt, and she moved with purpose, but her handshake was firm and direct, and when she looked at him, she was actually looking at him, not through him or past him, or at the space 3 inches above his left shoulder where some people looked. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for the letter," he said, "especially the part that was handwritten." She held his gaze for 1 beat longer than a handshake requires. "I write by hand when I mean something," she said. "Come in." Her office was on the top floor, 1 wall of glass. Atlanta spread below. She had an actual whiteboard covered in actual writing, not decorative working notes, numbers and arrows, and a word circled 3 times that said redundancy. She had a dead plant in the corner that no one had removed yet, and a framed photograph on the desk that he deliberately did not look at. She sat across from him at a round table, not behind her desk. He noticed that too. "Tell me about the Whitmore report," she said. "No preamble. What specifically? You told them 18 months. You lost the contract to Blackwood Agricultural Services. Blackwood told them 9 months. She had a folder in front of her, but she wasn't looking at it. "Why didn't you adjust your number?" Marcus looked at her steadily. "Because it was wrong." "You would have kept the contract. I would have kept the contract and delivered a lie," he said. "That's not keeping the contract. That's just delaying what you owe somebody." Diana Voss set her pen down on the table. She looked at him for 3 full seconds. He did not fill the silence because he had learned a long time ago that the people who are worth talking to don't need you to fill their silences. "My company," she said, "has worked with 40 independent operators in the Southeast in the last 3 years. I have received 1 report in that time that I would describe as fully honest. That was yours. Do you know what the other 39 had in common? They told you what they thought you wanted to hear. They told their clients what the clients wanted to hear," she said, "which eventually costs everyone more than the honest answer would have." She picked up her pen again. "I am not interested in vendors who optimize for the short term. I am building something that needs to last 20 years, and I cannot build it on numbers that round up." "I round down," Marcus said. "When I'm uncertain, I round down. I'd rather underestimate and exceed it than promise what I can't guarantee." She wrote something on the pad in front of her. He couldn't read it from where he sat. "How long have you been running Webb & Sons alone?" she asked. 4 years, he said. "Before that?" He looked at the table for a moment. Not long, just a moment. "My wife and I started it together," he said. "She passed 4 years ago. I've been running it since." He looked back up. My son helps on weekends. He's 9. Diana Voss did not say, "I'm sorry," the way most people said it quickly reflexively to get past the awkward part. She said nothing for a beat, and then she said, "What's his name? Darius." "Does Darius know what his father does?" "He can read a soil core," Marcus said, "better than most adults." Something moved in her face at that. Not quite a smile. Something that preceded a smile like the sky before rain. "The summit is in 2 weeks," she said. "I'd like you there. Not as a vendor. As a partner, I'm considering for a long-term contract structure that would involve 3 properties in North Georgia, 2 in Alabama, and 1 remediation project in South Carolina that is significantly more complicated than the others." She paused. "I am going to be direct with you, Mr. Webb. I do not extend these invitations widely. I extended this one because your soil numbers don't lie, and in my experience, people whose professional numbers don't lie tend to be people whose personal character doesn't either. I may be wrong about that. I don't think I am." Marcus sat with that for a moment. He was a man who took things seriously when they were meant seriously, and he could tell the difference. "I'll be there," he said. She stood and extended her hand. He shook it. At the door he turned back. "The plant in the corner," he said. "It's not dead. It's dormant. It needs water and about 4 feet to the left. Better light." She turned and looked at the plant. Then she looked at him. "How do you know?" "I know plants," he said, and walked out. 2 days before the summit, Marcus's neighbor Ruth, 67, retired schoolteacher. The woman who watched Darius on his long days stopped him in the driveway with her particular look that meant she had something to say and was deciding how to say it. "Marcus," she said, "you know who else is going to be at that conference?" He was loading his weekend bag into the truck. "Which client? I don't know all the—" "Not a client." She pressed her lips flat. "Never mind, just—" She waved her hand. "Just be careful, okay? Big companies like that always have something happening underneath the surface." He looked at her for a long moment. "Ruth, finish what you started." But she shook her head and walked back to her porch. He stood there with his bag in his hand and the question she had dropped and left unfinished, and he made the decision that he would ask her later. He never did. By the time it would have mattered later was too late, and Darius had asked to come. Marcus had said no, it was a work event. Darius had said, "You always say it's a work event, and then you come home different." Marcus had stopped folding a shirt and looked at his son. "What do you mean different?" "Like you're thinking about something," Darius said. "More than usual." Marcus had looked at the boy for a long moment and then said, "I'll tell you about it when I'm back." Which was not a real answer. Darius accepted it with the patience of a child who has learned that some answers from fathers take time. He checked in at the Emory Conference Center Thursday afternoon. The summit was 30 regional operators. He knew 4 of them by reputation, 2 of them by name. He was one of 3 black operators in the room, which was not a surprise to him, and which he noted and moved past, because noting and moving past was a skill he had developed early and had been required to use often enough that it no longer took conscious effort. Nay. The opening reception was wine and conversation, and the particular noise of people performing their industries at each other. Marcus was standing near the windows with a glass of water he didn't drink at professional events, another discipline that had taken time to build, when Patrick Hale appeared at his shoulder. Patrick was Diana's head of regional operations, late 50s, a thick-necked man with the look of someone who had been in agricultural business long enough to have gotten burned at least twice. "Marcus Webb," Patrick said, shaking his hand. "I have read your Whitmore report, the whole thing, twice." "Most people stop at the executive summary," Marcus said. "Most people miss the part on page 11 where you footnoted 3 things that contradicted the main finding." Patrick's eyes were assessing him in a way that was direct enough to be respectful. "Most operators wouldn't do that. The contradictions were real," Marcus said. "Leaving them out would have made the report easier to read and less true." Patrick nodded slowly. Diana said you were the kind of man who rounds down. He took a drink of his wine. She was right. He paused, and something in his face shifted into a register that was more careful. She's also the kind of woman who... He stopped, finished his wine. Just do good work this weekend, he said. You'll be fine. And he moved away into the crowd. Marcus stood with his water glass, and the second unfinished sentence of the week, and the sensation that something was happening in the space around him that he had not yet been given enough information to understand. Diana Voss appeared at the dinner. She entered from the side of the room, not the front, not performing an entrance, just arriving, and moved through the space with the quiet efficiency of someone who did not need the room's attention to feel comfortable in it. She stopped to speak to 4 different people in 4 different ways, adjusting her register for each reading the room the way a field operator reads topography. Marcus watched without appearing to watch. She found his table near the end of the seating. She did not sit next to him. She sat 3 seats down. But when the dinner conversation reached him, she guided it there deliberately. Without appearing to guide it, she let him talk. He walked through a soil remediation case in Hall County, the chemistry of it, the timeline, the unexpected complication in month 4 that had required a full reassessment. He talked for 9 minutes. Every person at the table was listening by minute 3. Diana Voss watched him from 3 seats down with both hands resting on the table and said nothing until he finished. Then she said, "That reassessment in month 4. What did you tell the landowner?" "I told him I had been wrong in my initial model," Marcus said. "That the correction was going to add 6 weeks. He paused. He asked me if he should find someone else. I told him that was his right. He kept me on. "Why?" she asked. "I think because I told him the truth when it cost me something to tell it," Marcus said. "People remember that." Diana looked at him for a 3 count. Then she looked down at her plate and said quietly enough that it was partly to herself, "Yes, they do." "Whoa." After dinner in the corridor, Marcus pulled out his phone and called Darius. Darius answered on the second ring and said, "Did you meet her?" "Who?" "The lady from the letter, the CEO." Marcus paused. "How do you know about the letter?" "I read it," Darius said completely without shame. "You left it on the table for 3 days. I read it. She said your report was honest. Do people usually say that?" Marcus leaned against the corridor wall and looked at the ceiling. "No," he said. "Not usually." "Then she must be smart," Darius said. There was a pause. "Dad, did you eat?" "Yes." "Something real or just coffee?" Darius. "I'm going to need you to be more specific." "Good night, Dee." He hung up. He stood in the corridor for a moment longer and allowed himself very briefly to smile at his phone. Then he put it in his pocket and walked back toward the conference wing. "Yes, sir." The man he passed in the hallway near the east staircase was tall, mid-50s, gray at the temples, wearing a suit that had been tailored specifically for him. He glanced at Marcus the way certain men glance at certain other men, measuring, categorizing, arriving at a conclusion in under 2 seconds. He did not speak. He walked on. Marcus did not know who he was. He would find out the next morning that the man's name was Gerald Voss, Diana's ex-husband, and that Gerald Voss had flown in from Charlotte that afternoon and had not been invited. Marcus found out about Gerald Voss at 6:47 in the morning. He had been up since 5, the way he was always up since 5, because the farm didn't care what day it was, and his body had stopped caring either. He was on his second cup of coffee in the small sitting area off the main conference corridor when Patrick Hale walked in, saw him, and stopped moving for just long enough to signal that something had changed overnight. "You heard," Patrick said. It wasn't a question. "Heard what?" Marcus said. Patrick pulled out the chair across from him and sat down and put both hands flat on the table. "Gerald Voss checked in last night, Diana's ex-husband. He's in room 318. He said it the way a man says something he wishes he didn't have to say. He was not on the guest list. He was not invited. He called the front desk directly and booked his own room. Marcus set his coffee cup down. Why? Because Gerald Voss has been on the Voss Agronomic Group board since the company was founded, Patrick said. He and Diana built it together. When they divorced 3 years ago, he kept his board seat. He has been contesting her operational authority every quarter since. Patrick looked at him steadily. And he has made it very clear to 3 separate board members that he believes Diana makes decisions based on personal factors rather than business ones. He paused. He is here to watch her, to build a case. Marcus said nothing for a moment. He looked at his coffee. And Diana knows he's here. She knew when she woke up. Patrick's jaw tightened. She found out the same way you just did. Someone told her at 6 this morning. He leaned forward slightly. Marcus, I am telling you this because you are about to walk into a room today where every interaction Diana has with every partner is being evaluated, not by her, by him. He let that land. Just be aware of the geometry of the room. Marcus looked at him. You're telling me to keep my distance. I'm telling you to know what you're walking into, Patrick said. What you do with that is your business. He stood, picked up his coffee, and walked out. Marcus sat alone in the room for 4 minutes. He thought about the handwritten note at the bottom of the letter. He thought about the way Diana had let him talk at dinner and watched like she was hearing something she had been waiting to hear. He thought about Gerald Voss in the hallway the night before the 2-second appraisal, the silence. He finished his coffee. Then he stood up and walked into the day. The morning session was a roundtable on soil certification standards and regional compliance mapping. Diana ran it. She stood at the front of the room with a confidence that was not performed. It was structural, built into the way she held her body, and she moved through complex regulatory data with the fluency of someone who had spent years making sure no one could ever say she didn't know her own business. Gerald Voss sat in the back row. He had not been introduced. He sat with a yellow legal pad and a pen, and he wrote things down every time Diana spoke. Marcus sat 4 rows ahead of Gerald and slightly to the left. He could feel the man behind him the way you feel weather before it arrives. Midway through the session, Diana was walking through a variance analysis on a remediation timeline, and she reached a number that her slide showed as a projection range. She stopped. She looked at the slide. Then she said, "That range is wrong. The lower bound is optimistic by about 8%. She clicked back to the previous slide, pulled up the source data on the screen, and recalculated it live in front of 30 people. It took 3 minutes. She said, "The corrected range is here. I apologize for the error in the prepared materials." She moved on. Not one person in the room said anything, but Marcus noticed that half of them shifted in their seats, and not from discomfort. From the particular adjustment people make when they witness someone do something they had not expected. He glanced back once. Gerald Voss had stopped writing. At the break, Marcus stepped into the hallway for air. He was standing near the windows when Diana appeared beside him. She did not approach slowly. She moved directly the way she always moved. "You caught the variance error," she said. He looked at her. "How do you know?" "Because you were the only person in the room who didn't look surprised when I corrected it. Everyone else looked surprised. You looked like you were waiting." She studied him with the particular focus of someone who read people the way he read soil cores. "You already knew it was wrong. The lower bound assumed consistent moisture retention," he said. "The data set you were pulling from included 2 drought year samples. It skewed the projection." She looked at him for 3 seconds. "Why didn't you say something?" "It was your room," he said. "And I figured you'd catch it." "What if I hadn't?" He held her gaze. "Then I would have said something after." He paused. Quietly. She held his gaze for a moment that lasted slightly longer than it needed to. Then she said, "Gerald is here." Not a question. She was watching his face to see if he already knew. "I heard," he said. Her jaw moved just slightly, the way a person's jaw moves when they are controlling something they have decided not to say. "He's going to try to make everything this weekend look like something it isn't," she said. "I want you to know that." "I know that," Marcus said. She looked at him for another beat, and whatever she was looking for, she apparently found enough of it to satisfy her because she nodded once and walked back into the room. Gerald Voss stepped into the hallway 30 seconds later. He looked at Marcus with the direct, calibrated look of a man who wanted Marcus to know he had been watching. "Gerald Voss," he said. He did not extend his hand. "Marcus Webb," Marcus said. He kept his hands in his pockets. "Webb and Sons," Gerald said. "Decatur. I read your Whitmore report." He said it the way someone names a piece of evidence. "Diana has spoken highly of your operation." "Has she?" Marcus said. Flat. Not a question. "She tends to get enthusiastic about vendors she finds personally interesting," Gerald said. "It's one of her qualities." He said qualities the way certain men say it to mean something else entirely. "I'd encourage you not to read too much into her attention." Marcus looked at Gerald Voss for a long, even moment. The kind of moment that is not aggressive and is not retreating. It is simply present in the way that a man who has been underestimated his entire life learns to be present completely, without apology, without explaining himself. "Mr. Voss," Marcus said, "I appreciate the advice." He turned and walked back into the room. Gerald said nothing behind him. Marcus did not look back. The afternoon session broke at 4. Diana caught him at the edge of the corridor, moving with purpose, and said without preamble, "Walk the east property with me. I want your assessment on the North Georgia parcels." She held up a folder. "Real assessment, not a preview, the real thing." "Now," he said. "Is there a problem?" "Messy." He looked at her, and then past her at the hallway behind where Patrick was watching from near the conference room door with the expression of a man silently cataloging a situation. "No problem," Marcus said. They walked, not a stroll. Diana moved with direction, and he matched it. She had the parcel maps in the folder, and she spread them out on a property fence at the edge of the site, and talked through what Voss Agronomic was planning a 3-year remediation cycle on a former industrial-adjacent agricultural tract, high metal content in the upper horizon yield recovery targeted for year 4. She asked specific questions. He answered specific questions. She pushed back on 2 of his assessments, and she was right to push back on one of them, and he told her so, and she wrote it down. "Most people don't admit when I push back on them," she said. "Most people probably don't like being wrong," he said. "You don't like being wrong either," she said. "But you like being accurate more." She looked at him sideways. "That's different." He said nothing. But she was right, and she knew it, and they both knew she was right, and that was a kind of conversation Marcus Webb had not had with another person in a very long time. They were 20 minutes into the walk when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Darius. He let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it buzzed again. He stopped walking. "I need to take this," he said. Diana stopped without complaint. He stepped 2 paces aside and answered. "D. What happened?" "Dad!" Darius's voice was tight in the specific way it got when he was trying not to be scared and wasn't fully succeeding. "Ruth fell. On the porch steps. She's okay, the neighbor called the ambulance already, but she's at Decatur General and I'm here alone, and I—" His voice broke for just a second. "I didn't know who else to call." Marcus turned away from Diana. "Are you in the house?" "Yes." "Doors locked?" "Yes." "You did right calling me. Listen, I'm going to call Mrs. Patterson next door. She's going to come over and stay with you. You don't move. You don't open the door for anyone else. You hear me?" "Yes, sir. Ruth is going to be fine." "D. She fell. She didn't. It's going to be fine." A pause. You okay?" A small pause on the other end. "Yeah," Darius said, with the particular fragile bravery of a 9-year-old who was not entirely okay, but was trying. "Yeah, I'm okay." He hung up and turned around. Diana was standing exactly where he had left her, watching him, with a look that had rearranged itself from professional into something else, something quieter. "Your son," she said. "His babysitter fell. He's alone." Marcus was already pulling up Mrs. Patterson's number. "I'm sorry, I need to—" "Make your call," Diana said immediately. "Go." Sorry. He made 3 calls in 4 minutes. Mrs. Patterson picked up on the first ring and said she'd be there in 2 minutes flat, which he believed, because Mrs. Patterson had never in 12 years said a thing she didn't mean. He called Darius back and told him. He called Decatur General and spoke to a charge nurse who confirmed that Ruth Hensley, 67, had been admitted with a hairline fracture in her left wrist and a bruised hip, and was stable and talking, and apparently arguing about whether she needed to be there at all, which meant she was fine. He put his phone in his pocket. He breathed once. Diana was still there. "Is he okay?" she asked. "He will be," Marcus said. "Ruth, his sitter, she's stable. My neighbor's with Darius." He ran a hand over his face. "I should go back. We can go back," she said. "Not you should go. We." He looked at her. She had already folded the parcel maps back into the folder. "Come on," she said. "We'll finish this tomorrow." They walked back. They didn't talk about the parcels. Diana said after a minute, "How old were you when you started the business?" 38, he said. "Emma and I started it the year after Darius was born." "She was your partner," Diana said. "Not a question." "In the business and everything else," he said. He paused. "She was the one who wrote the reports. I did the field work. She had a way of taking technical data and making it read like a human being had written it." He stopped. He hadn't said that to anyone before, not exactly like that. "After she passed, I kept the format. I figured if she'd built it, the least I could do was maintain it." Diana walked beside him and did not say, "I'm sorry." She said, "That's why the Whitmore report read the way it did." He looked at her. "What do you mean?" "It read like someone who understood that the people reading it had something at stake," she said. "Most technical reports read like the author forgot there were people on the other end." She paused. "Emma knew that, and you kept it because she built it." He did not say anything for a long moment. He watched the path in front of him. "Yeah," he said finally. "That's exactly right." They reached the entrance. Diana stopped. Gerald Voss was standing near the doors, talking to one of the other partners, but his eyes cut to Diana, and then to Marcus, and then back, and the calculation in them was visible enough that Marcus could read it from 15 feet. Diana saw it too. Marcus could tell because her posture shifted almost nothing, just a degree the way a person shifts when they have been watched for so long by a particular person that their body registers the gaze before their mind does. "He's been doing this for 3 years, she said quietly. Not to Marcus specifically. More to the air in front of her, the way people say true things when they stop performing patience. "Every room I walk into, he's in the corner of it counting something." "What's he counting?" Marcus asked. She looked at Gerald for one more second and then looked away. "Reasons," she said. "He's always counting reasons." She walked inside without waiting for a response. Marcus followed a step behind, and as he passed through the door he felt Gerald Voss's eyes on him, the way you feel a cold front coming, not dramatic, not loud. Just a change in pressure, the kind you learn to take seriously, because the ones that don't announce themselves are always the ones that cost you the most. That evening, Patrick found Marcus in the corridor at 8:15 with a look on his face that said, the day wasn't finished with either of them yet. "Gerald requested a meeting with Diana tonight," Patrick said. "Board matters, he called it." He exhaled through his nose. "She took the meeting. She always takes the meeting. She thinks if she refuses, it looks like she's afraid of him." He shook his head. "It's not fear. She just—" He stopped. She built this company from a regional operation with 4 contracts into what it is. Gerald was there at the beginning, and that means something to her, and she has not figured out how to hold that true at the same time as how dangerous he is. Marcus looked at him. "How long have you been watching this?" 3 years, Patrick said. "Since the divorce. I was there before the divorce. I watched the whole thing." His voice was flat in the way that people get flat when they have witnessed something they could not prevent, and have made a kind of peace with the weight of that. "She doesn't need protecting," he added quickly. "Don't misread me. She is the most capable person I have worked for in 30 years. She just—" He shook his head again. "She keeps thinking that if she handles him well enough, correctly enough, professionally enough, he'll eventually stop." "Will he?" Marcus said. Patrick looked at him. "No," he said. "He won't. Because what he wants isn't resolution. What he wants is the version of her that needed him." He straightened. "The board vote is Monday, 3 days from now. He is here because he thinks he can find something this weekend to take into that room." He paused. "I don't know what he's looking for, but he hasn't found it yet, and I'd like to keep it that way." He walked off. Marcus stood in the corridor alone. Somewhere in Decatur, Darius was in the house with Mrs. Patterson, probably asleep by now, probably with the light on the way. He always slept with the light on when he was in the house without his father. Ruth was in Decatur General with her wrist in a cast, arguing with a nurse. The east parcels in North Georgia had a metal contamination problem in the upper horizon that was going to require a remediation approach. Marcus had already begun designing in the back of his mind, because that was how his brain worked. It took a problem and began solving it, even when he hadn't given it permission to. And somewhere in this building, Diana Voss was sitting in a room with a man who had spent 3 years counting reasons, and she was trying to handle it correctly and professionally, and in a way that would eventually make him stop. Marcus had been a black man in professional spaces long enough to understand one thing deeply. Some people do not stop because you handle them well. They stop because the thing they were trying to take from you no longer belongs to them. He went to his room. He did not call anyone. He sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet, and he thought about Emma the way he still thought about her in the specific moments when something was happening that he could not fully see the shape of yet. Emma had always been able to see the shape of things before he could. She would have seen it already. She would have said something direct and accurate and probably uncomfortable, and she would have been right. Yeah. He didn't know what she would have said tonight, but he thought she would have said something about the fact that a woman who built a company on honest numbers and wrote honest in blue ink at the bottom of a letter was currently sitting in a room with someone who was trying to make honesty look like a liability. He picked up his phone. He almost called Darius. He put the phone down. But
Yes, sir.
He closed his eyes. Tomorrow was Saturday, the final full day of the summit. The board vote was Monday. Gerald Voss was in room 318 counting. And Marcus Webb had not yet decided what kind of man he was going to be this weekend. He had a feeling that by Sunday, the decision was going to get made for him whether he was ready or not. He did not sleep well. That was the honest accounting of Saturday night going into Sunday morning. Marcus lay in the dark of his room at the Emory Conference Center and stared at the ceiling and ran the geometry of the weekend through his head the way he ran soil calculations methodically, without sentiment, looking for the number that didn't add up. Gerald Voss in room 318. The board vote on Monday. Patrick's voice saying he's counting reasons. Diana's voice saying he keeps thinking if she handles him correctly, he'll eventually stop. And beneath all of it, the thing Marcus hadn't said out loud to anyone, the thing he had been carrying since Thursday afternoon, when Diana Voss crouched down to talk to a 9-year-old boy she had never met, and took his question about ducks seriously. He was up at 5:08, dressed by 5:20, in the corridor by 5:25. Diana was already in the small conference anteroom at the end of the hall. She was sitting at the table with both hands wrapped around a coffee cup and a legal pad in front of her covered in handwriting. She looked up when he walked in. She did not look surprised to see him. She looked like she had been waiting for someone to walk through that door and had not let herself decide who she wanted it to be. "You sleep?" she asked. "Some," he said. He poured a coffee from the side table and sat down across from her. "You." "No," she said. Just that. No explanation. No performance of being fine. He looked at the legal pad. She turned it slightly so he could read the top line. It said in her handwriting, "What he can use, what he can't, what I'm not sure about." 3 columns. The third one was the longest. "The meeting last night," Marcus said. "How did it go?" She looked at her coffee. "He told me that he has 3 board members prepared to support a motion to appoint an independent operational auditor, effective immediately after Monday's vote." She said it cleanly, the way she said everything without letting her voice drop into the thing underneath it. "An auditor would have access to every decision I've made in the last 18 months. Every vendor selection, every contract extension, every partnership I've initiated." She paused. "Including this one." Marcus said nothing. "He told me the basis of the motion would be that my recent operational decisions reflect personal bias rather than business judgment." She finally looked up. He used those words, personal bias. He said it like he was reading from a legal brief. Her jaw tightened for just a second. "He has been building this for 8 months. I knew he was building it. I did not know he was this close." "What do you need to get through Monday?" Marcus asked. She looked at him directly. "I need the weekend to look exactly like what it is," she said. "A professional summit. Standard partner engagement. Nothing that gives him a frame to put around it." She held his gaze. "And I need Gerald to believe that I am not, that there is nothing personal in any of this, that the framing he has been constructing is wrong." Marcus held her gaze back. He understood what she was not saying. He understood it completely, and he let her not say it. "Okay," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "That's all you're going to say?" "What else is there to say?" he said. "You told me what you need. I heard you." She looked down at the legal pad. She drew a line through something in the third column. She picked up her coffee. They sat in the quiet for 4 minutes and said nothing more, and it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that 2 people arrive at when they have been honest with each other, and the honesty has settled, and there is nothing left to perform. At 7 o'clock, the rest of the summit began to wake up. At 7:30, the morning session started. At 8:15, Gerald Voss walked into the room and took the same seat in the back row. Marcus felt him arrive without turning around. The morning session was a working group on contract structure. Marcus's group, which Patrick had organized, 3 operators presenting their current service models for peer review. Marcus went second. He stood at the front of the room and talked through Webb & Sons service agreement framework, the tiered remediation schedule, the reporting cadence, the clause he had written himself that said in plain English that if his initial assessment proved inaccurate by more than 15% in either direction, the client had the right to a full reassessment at no additional cost. Someone in the third row said, "You put that in the contract voluntarily." "Yes," Marcus said. "Why would you do that?" the man said, not hostile, genuinely puzzled. "Because if I'm wrong by 15%, the client is carrying the cost of my mistake," Marcus said. "That's not a contract, that's a transfer of risk onto someone who trusted me." He paused. "I don't operate that way." The room was quiet for a beat. Then Patrick said from his seat near the wall, "That's worth writing down, people." And 3 people actually did. Marcus glanced at Diana. She was watching him with both hands flat on the table. Gerald Voss in the back row was writing on his legal pad. Marcus could not see what he was writing. He did not need to. He turned back to the room and finished his presentation. At 10:30, the break came. Marcus was pouring a second coffee when the woman beside him said quietly, "You know Gerald Voss is writing about you." He turned. She was one of the other operators, a woman named Carla Simmons, who ran a mid-sized operation in Savannah. She had a direct face and steady eyes, and the look of someone who had been around long enough to say the thing other people were thinking. I can see his pad from where I'm sitting, she said. He's been writing your name since your presentation started. Marcus looked at her. What's he writing? I don't know, she said. But he wrote your name and he circled it. Twice. She poured her coffee. I don't know your situation here, but I have been in rooms with men like Gerald Voss before, and they do not circle names out of admiration. No, Marcus said. They don't. She looked at him for a moment. You seem unbothered, she said. I seem it, he said. She almost smiled. She walked away. By noon, Marcus had a full picture of the geometry. Gerald was watching Diana. Gerald was watching Marcus. Gerald was waiting for the frame he was building to find a corner to anchor to. And the entire summit, 30 people, 3 days, an investment of professional credibility on Diana's part, was the stage he had chosen to do it on because public discrediting was always more effective than private accusation. Marcus had seen this before. Not in boardrooms. In different rooms with different stakes, but the same fundamental architecture. The man in the back counting reasons. The woman in the front performing correctness in the hope that correctness would eventually satisfy him. It never did. Marcus had learned that in his bones before he was 30. At 12:45, he found Patrick in the corridor. Gerald is documenting the summit, Marcus said. He's building a record. Patrick nodded. I know. Diana needs to stop trying to make the weekend look normal, Marcus said. Normal isn't going to be enough. Patrick looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean, Gerald came here because he thinks he can catch something, Marcus said. He's not going to leave without trying to create something if he can't catch it. And the more Diana manages herself around him, the more material he has. Because managed behavior looks like hiding. He paused. She needs to stop managing and start being. Patrick was quiet for a moment. That's easy to say. I know, Marcus said. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's true. Patrick looked at him for a long count. You've been here 2 days, he said. Not accusatory, almost wondering. Yes, Marcus said. And you've already figured out what I've been watching for 3 years, Patrick said. You figured it out too, Marcus said. You just can't say it to her, because you work for her and it's not your place. He held Patrick's gaze. It might be mine. Patrick said nothing for 4 full seconds. Then he said, Be careful, Marcus, and walked away. A Sunday afternoon came in fast. The formal sessions ended at 2. The summit was effectively over. Partners were arranging departures, exchanging cards, loading vehicles. The official closing was a late afternoon reception at the pavilion adjacent to the main building, open air informal. Diana would give brief closing remarks, and that would be the end of it. Marcus was in his room at 3:15 packing his bag when his phone rang. Darius. He answered immediately. Hey Dee, everything okay? Ruth called from the hospital, Darius said. She said to tell you she's going home tomorrow and she doesn't need a fuss made. He paused. She also said to tell you that you should stop worrying and pay attention to what's in front of you. Marcus stopped folding a shirt. Ruth said that. Word for word, Darius said. I wrote it down. A pause. Dad, what's in front of you? He looked at the wall. He thought about Emma. He thought about what Emma would have said. He thought about Diana in the anteroom at 5:25 in the morning with a legal pad and 3 columns, and the longest one being the things she wasn't sure about. I don't know yet, he said. Okay, Darius said. But Dad, yeah. Ruth doesn't say things she doesn't mean. I know, Dee. Just so you know that I know that, Darius said, and hung up. Marcus stood in the room with the phone in his hand for 30 seconds. Then he finished packing his bag, set it by the door, and went downstairs. The pavilion at 4 o'clock was people moving in the loose, relieved way of a weekend ending well. Wine glasses and handshakes, and the particular warmth of professional relationships that had been upgraded over 3 days. Marcus stood near the far edge with a water glass and watched the room do what rooms do at the end of things. He saw Gerald Voss at 4:22. Gerald was standing near the side of the pavilion 15 feet from where Diana was speaking to two of the Savannah partners. He was not speaking to anyone. He was watching Diana with the legal pad under his arm, and the particular stillness of someone who has decided that this is the moment. Marcus watched Gerald watch Diana. At 4:31, Diana's closing remarks began. She stood at the front, no podium, no notes, and spoke for 8 minutes about what Voss Agronomic was building and what the partnership meant and what she believed the work was worth. She was direct and clear, and she did not over-explain, and she did not manage her delivery for Gerald's benefit. She just spoke. For the first time all weekend, she was not performing correctness. She was just being herself, in a room which was. Marcus had come to understand the most threatening thing she could do to Gerald Voss, because the thing he needed in order to win was the version of her that was afraid of him. And in those 8 minutes, she was not afraid of anything. Gerald's jaw tightened. Marcus watched it happen from across the room. At 4:44, the remarks ended. The reception began to dissolve. People drifted toward exits. Marcus set his water glass down and was moving toward the door when he heard Gerald's voice 6 feet to his left, aimed at Diana, cutting through the ambient noise with the particular precision of someone who had rehearsed the moment. Diana. Not loud. Controlled. A word. Diana stopped. She turned. Patrick 10 feet away went still. "I think we've said what needs to be said," Diana said. Her voice was even. "I disagree," Gerald said. He stepped forward 1 step into the space that was still public, but barely. "You have spent this weekend building relationships with vendors that I will characterize on Monday as operationally compromised by personal preference, particularly." He turned his head and looked directly at Marcus. One vendor whose inclusion in this summit was not standard process. The room had not gone quiet, but the people near them had. Carla Simmons, 8 feet away, had stopped moving. Patrick had not moved in 20 seconds. Diana held very still. "Marcus Webb was invited based on his operational record," she said, "which is documented and defensible, and which I will present on Monday without difficulty." "I'm sure you will," Gerald said. "The question is whether the board will find your judgment credible in light of—" He gestured once briefly between Diana and Marcus. "The broader picture." It was not a specific accusation. It was the architecture of one built so that any denial would look like confirmation. Marcus had been standing 8 feet away, and he had not moved, and he had not spoken because it was Diana's room, and he had told himself all weekend that it was Diana's room, and he had meant it. But he had also been a black man in professional spaces for 30 years, and he knew what a frame looked like when someone was building one around you, and he knew what happened when the person inside the frame stayed quiet because they were trying to be correct. He walked forward. 3 steps. He stopped beside Diana, not behind her. Beside her, and he looked at Gerald Voss directly. "Mr. Voss," he said. His voice was level. "I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You are suggesting to this room that Diana Voss's decision to invite me to this summit was motivated by personal preference rather than professional assessment." Gerald looked at him. "I'm suggesting that the optics—" "I'm not asking about the optics," Marcus said. "I'm asking if you are prepared to say in this room in front of these people that Diana Voss made a professionally unsound decision." He held Gerald's gaze. "Because if you are, then I would like to respond to it directly. And if you're not—" He paused. "Then I'd ask you to be precise about what you actually mean, because imprecision in professional settings has a cost, and I have found that the people who pay it are rarely the ones who create it." Yay. The room was quiet now. Actually quiet. Gerald looked at Marcus for 5 seconds. His jaw was working slightly. He was recalculating something behind his eyes. "My concern," he said more carefully, "is with process." "Then document the process," Marcus said. "Webb & Son's engagement with Voss Agronomic is on paper. Every communication, every data submission, every site assessment request. It is all documented. Review it. He kept his voice completely even. If there is a process problem, the documentation will show it. If there isn't, the documentation will show that too. He paused. I round down, Mr. Voss. When I'm uncertain, I round down, Miss. Voss invited me to this summit because my documentation reflects that. If you have a dispute with the documentation, I am happy to walk through it with you. He held the gaze one final second. Monday, in the room, with the board present. Gerald Voss said nothing. He looked at Diana. Diana was looking at Marcus with an expression he had not seen on her face before, and he could not name it precisely. But it was not gratitude. It was something older and quieter than gratitude. The kind of thing a person's face does when they have been carrying something alone for a very long time and someone has just put their hand on it from the other side. Gerald looked between them once more. Then he straightened his jacket, picked up his legal pad, and walked toward the exit without another word. Carla Simmons exhaled audibly. Patrick, from across the room, dropped his chin once, almost imperceptibly. The ambient noise of the pavilion slowly rebuilt itself around the silence Gerald Voss had left behind. Diana turned to Marcus. Her voice, when she found it, was low. You didn't have to do that. I know, he said. He's going to use it, she said. He's going to frame that as, I know what he's going to do, Marcus said. And the documentation is going to say what it says, which is the truth. He looked at her. You spent this whole weekend being careful, being measured, trying to give him nothing. He held her gaze. He was going to take something anyway. That's what he does. So I figured if he was going to take something, it might as well be the truth. Diana looked at him for a long moment. The pavilion was emptying around them. Patrick had steered the last cluster of lingering partners toward the exit. The space was almost theirs. Marcus, she said. Her voice had changed registers. Not professional anymore. Something underneath professional. I have to tell you something. Okay, he said. I have been running this company for 11 years, she said. I have been in rooms with Gerald for 3 of those years, fighting to keep what I built. And in 3 years, not one person who works with me, not one partner, not one vendor. She stopped. Started again. No one has ever stood beside me in one of those moments. Not next to me. Beside me. He held very still. You don't work for me, she said. You're a potential partner. You have every professional reason to stay out of that. She paused. And you didn't. No, he said. I didn't. She looked at him. And then, in the almost empty pavilion at 4:58 on a Sunday afternoon, with Gerald Voss somewhere in the building, and the board vote 39 hours away, and every professional calculation pointing in a different direction. Diana Voss stepped forward, put her hand on Marcus Webb's arm, looked at him with the full unguarded weight of 3 years of holding everything together alone, and said, I need you to do something for me. What? He said. She looked past him just once toward the side entrance of the pavilion. Marcus followed her gaze. Gerald Voss had not left. He was standing just inside the doorway, legal pad in hand, watching. Diana looked back at Marcus. She moved. One knee, his lap, her hand on his chest. 4 inches. The full, precise, deliberate architecture of a woman who had spent 36 years learning exactly when to stop being careful. Kiss me, she said quietly. He's watching. Marcus Webb. 52 years old. Widower father. A man who rounded down when he was uncertain and had not been touched by a woman in 4 years, felt the full weight of that moment land on him like a field assessment he had not prepared for. His heart moved in his chest in a way he could not qualify or quantify or reduce to a number. He did not kiss her. He put his arm around her waist, steadied her, held the posture for the 30 seconds Gerald needed to see it, and said against her hair so quietly that the room could not hear, "Not like this, not because he's watching." She went very still in his arms. "When I do," he said, "it's going to be because I want to, not because it's useful." Gerald Voss looked at them for 30 more seconds. Then he walked out. Diana did not move for 8 seconds after he was gone. 8 full seconds in Marcus Webb's arms in an empty pavilion with the afternoon light and the sound of the city outside and the specific clarifying silence of a woman who has just heard something she did not know she needed to hear. Then she stood. She smoothed her jacket. She did not look away from him. "Okay," she said. Her voice was not entirely steady. "Okay." She picked up her bag from the chair behind her and walked toward the exit, and at the door she stopped just for a second without turning around and she said, "Thank you, Marcus." Not for the arm around her waist. Not for Gerald. For the thing he had said after. He stood in the pavilion alone and listened to her footsteps fade down the corridor, and thought about Emma the way he always thought about Emma in the moments that mattered. And he thought that Emma would have said, "You finally paid attention." And then she would have said, "It's about time." His phone buzzed. Darius. A text this time. 4 words. "Did you pay attention?" Marcus Webb stood alone in an empty room and felt something he had not felt in 4 years unlock in his chest. Quiet, and certain the way good soil announces itself. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest, all the way down. He typed back, "Yeah, D, I did." He drove back to Decatur that night with the windows up and the radio off, and the particular silence of a man who has just done something that cannot be undone and is not sure yet whether he regrets it. He did not regret it. That was the problem. He had stood beside a woman in a professional situation that had nothing to do with him, had inserted himself into a conflict that was not his. Conflict had said things to Gerald Voss in front of witnesses that would be remembered and possibly used, and he did not regret a single word of it. That concerned him more than the words themselves, because Marcus Webb had spent 4 years building a life on careful, deliberate choices, and what he had done in that pavilion was not careful. It was true, and he was learning at 52 that true and careful were not always the same direction. He pulled into the driveway at 9:47. The kitchen light was on. Mrs. Patterson's car was gone. He sat in the truck for 2 minutes before going inside. Darius was on the couch, supposedly asleep, obviously not. He opened one eye when Marcus came through the door. "You look different," he said. "Go to bed, D." Different like the thing happened, Darius said. He was 9 years old, and he said it with the confidence of someone who had been right about this for several days. "The thing with the CEO lady." Marcus set his bag down. He looked at his son. "What do you know about CEO ladies?" "I know you drove 2 hours to a conference and you came back looking like you figured something out," Darius said. "And I know Ruth told you to pay attention to what's in front of you." He sat up fully. "Did you pay attention?" Marcus crossed the room and sat on the edge of the couch beside his son. Darius was small for 9 the way Emma had been small, but he had Emma's eyes, the kind of eyes that saw things they were too young to have a full vocabulary for. "I paid attention," Marcus said. "Good," Darius said. He lay back down. "Is she nice?" Marcus looked at the ceiling. "She's honest," he said. "Which is better?" Darius considered this with appropriate seriousness. "Okay," he said. "That's good." He pulled the blanket up. "Night, Dad." "Night, D." Marcus sat on the edge of that couch for 5 minutes after Darius fell asleep. Then he went to bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about Monday. Monday came with the particular weight of things that have been building for a long time and have finally run out of runway. Marcus was at the farm by 5 in the field by 5:30, taking soil cores on the back quarter because the back quarter needed it, and because physical work had always been the way he thought through things that had no physical solution. He was on his 7th core at 7:14 when his phone rang. "Patrick, the board vote is at 10, Patrick said. "Gerald filed his motion at 8 this morning. Formal request for an independent operational audit. He cited, and I quote, a pattern of vendor selection that reflects personal rather than professional judgment, with specific reference to the Webb and Sons engagement and the events of this past weekend. Marcus pulled the core, looked at it, set it in the tray. How specific? He described the scene in the pavilion, Patrick said. He said Diana initiated physical contact with a vendor in a public setting during a professional event. A pause. He did not describe it accurately, but he described it in a way that is difficult to disprove without making it look worse. Marcus put the core tray down. What does Diana need from me? Nothing, Patrick said immediately. She said to tell you that explicitly. She said this is her fight and she does not want you in the room, and she does not want you making any statements or communications that could be entered into the record. Another pause longer. She also said to tell you that she meant what she said in the pavilion, and she does not regret it. Marcus was quiet. She's going in there alone, Marcus, Patrick said, like she always does. How are the board numbers? Marcus asked. 7-5 in her favor going in, Patrick said. Gerald needs to flip 2 votes. He's been working on those 2 for 3 months. He exhaled. It's close. What time will it be done? Noon at the latest, Patrick said. I'll call you. Marcus hung up. He stood in the field with the soil cores in the morning and the specific useless feeling of knowing exactly what is happening somewhere else and being unable to do anything about it except wait. He had felt this before. He had felt it in a hospital waiting room 4 years ago with Darius on his lap, and a doctor he didn't know yet walking toward him down a hallway. He had felt it the day he submitted the Whitmore report and sent it and could not take it back and had to wait to see what it cost him. He picked up the next core and kept working. Because that was what you did. You did the work in front of you, and you waited for the thing you could not control to resolve itself into whatever it was going to be. At 8:30, he called Ruth at Decatur General. She answered on the second ring with the particular energy of a woman who had decided that a hairline fracture was not going to inconvenience her for more than 48 hours. Before you say anything, she said, I am fine. My wrist is in a soft cast. I am going home this afternoon, and Darius made me a get well card that has a picture of a tractor on it for reasons I don't fully understand. He loves tractors, Marcus said. He loves you, Ruth said. That card is for you, not for me. A pause. Now, tell me about the weekend. He told her. Not everything. Enough. She listened without interrupting, which was not her natural state, which meant she was paying careful attention. When he finished, she said, You told him it would be because you wanted to, not because it was useful. Yes. Marcus James Webb, she said. Don't. That woman has been alone in a fight for 3 years, Ruth said. And you walked up beside her and told Gerald Voss to put his accusation in writing. She paused. Emma would have said that was the most you thing you have ever done. He said nothing. She also would have said, It's about time, Ruth said. And she would have been right. He could hear the smile in her voice. Go do your soil cores, baby. Some things work themselves out. Basher. He went back to the field. At 10:03, he thought about the boardroom. At 10:47, he stopped thinking about it because it did not help anything. At 11:52, Patrick called. 7-5, Patrick said. Her favor, Gerald's motion failed. Marcus put his hand on the top of the fence post beside him and let the news land. He didn't flip anyone. He flipped one, Patrick said. Margaret Osei the chair. She went with Gerald. A pause. But Diana had already spent 2 weeks building the case with Thomas Reeves, the independent director. He had been leaning Gerald for 2 months. She flipped him back. Another pause. She had documentation. Every communication with Webb and Sons. Every data submission. Every site report. Organized, indexed, presented in 12 minutes flat. She prepared for this, Marcus said. She has been preparing for this for 8 months, Patrick said. She knew this was coming. She knew Gerald was going to use the summit. She prepared for every version of it. His voice shifted into something almost quiet. She walked in there this morning, and she handed the board a document that was so clean, so precise, so completely unambiguous that Gerald's motion looked like what it was. A personal grievance dressed as a professional concern. Marcus stood in his field and breathed the morning air. "Is she okay?" "She walked out of that boardroom," Patrick said, "and she went directly back to her office, and she has been on the phone with regional operations for the last 40 minutes because she has a company to run." He paused. "She's okay. She's more than okay." Then quietly, "She asked me to tell you the vote was 7-5. She wanted you to know the number." After he hung up, Marcus stood at the fence for a long time. 7-5. Gerald had come into that weekend with 3 months of preparation and a legal pad, and the specific intention of dismantling something a woman had spent 11 years building. And Diana Voss had walked into a boardroom alone with documentation, and 12 minutes and walked back out with her company intact. Don't. He thought about what it cost to build something alone. He thought about Webb and Sons the first year without Emma, the months when the work was the only structure holding him upright. He thought about Darius asking if pancakes counted as a vegetable, and Ruth in the driveway with an unfinished sentence and the handwritten note at the bottom of a cream-colored envelope. He drove to Decatur General at 2 in the afternoon to bring Ruth home. She came out of the discharge process with her wrist in a soft cast and the particular dignity of someone who has decided that needing assistance is not the same as being diminished. He held the truck door. She got in without making a production of it. They drove for 4 minutes in comfortable quiet, and then she said, "She called, you know." He looked straight ahead. "Who called?" "Diana Voss," Ruth said. "This morning, around 9. She said it the way she said things that she had been holding until the right moment. She found my number in your emergency contact file, apparently. She called to make sure Darius was all right." A pause. "She spoke to him for 6 minutes. I timed it." Another pause. "She remembered his name. She asked about Gerald the stuffed pig. Darius told her that Gerald the pig is named after Gerald the pig in a book, not Gerald Voss, and she laughed for real, not polite laughing, real laughing. "Oh, Tim, my dear, by my way, mine." Marcus kept his eyes on the road. "She also said to tell you," Ruth continued, and I am quoting directly because she was very specific about the wording, she said to tell you that the board vote was 7-5, and that she would like to explain the 2 missing votes in person if you are available. Ruth folded her good hand over her cast. "She said in person specifically." Another pause. "I told her you were available." Ruth. "I told her Sunday," Ruth said. "I told her you make pancakes on Sunday, and Darius would like it if she came, and you would like it if she came, even if you were not going to say so yourself." She looked at him with the particular serenity of a woman who has made a decision on behalf of a man she has known long enough to know he needed one made. "I also told her that you make very good pancakes, and that Darius would grade hers honestly, and she should be prepared for a 7 out of 10 at best." She paused. She said 7 out of 10 sounded like exactly the right place to start. Marcus drove. He did not say anything for 40 seconds. Then he said, "You had no business doing that." "I have every business," Ruth said. "I have been watching you be alone for 4 years, baby. I have earned the business." She looked out the window. "Emma would agree with me." He said nothing, but his hands on the wheel had relaxed, which Ruth noticed because Ruth noticed everything. Tuesday, he was back in the field. Wednesday, he took a call from Patrick about the North Georgia parcel preliminary assessment. Professional cleaned the contract process, moving through its proper channels with third-party review documentation already filed. Thursday, he got a text from an unknown number that said, "Carla Simmons. Savannah. I watched what you did in that pavilion. Well done. Call me if you ever want a peer in this industry." He saved the number. Friday morning, he was at his desk with the Webb and Sons soil reports when his phone buzzed. "Diana. A text, not a call. He read it twice before responding. It said, "Ruth told me you make good pancakes. I make terrible ones. My late husband used to say the only thing I can't do is cook. He was right about that, and wrong about most other things. Sunday at 8 if you'll have me. I'll bring coffee. Real coffee, not the gas station kind." He sat with that text for 2 minutes. He thought about the gas station coffee comment, which was specific enough to be funny and honest enough to be real. He thought about a woman who had just survived a board vote by 7-5, and whose first social communication after was a self-deprecating reference to her cooking. He thought about what Ruth had said about 7 out of 10 being exactly the right place to start. He typed back Sunday at 8. "Bring the coffee. Darius will handle the grading." She sent back one word. "Fair." He put his phone in his pocket and went back to the soil reports, and spent the rest of the morning with numbers that did not lie, which was, he had decided a long time ago, the best kind of company. Saturday, he told Darius that someone was coming for breakfast on Sunday. Darius looked up from the book he was reading, the duck farm book Diana had sent, which had not left his nightstand, and said with the particular composure of a 9-year-old who had been expecting this, "Is it the CEO lady?" "It is," Marcus said. "Is she coming because of the pancakes or because of you?" Marcus considered this. Probably both. Darius went back to his book. "I'll be ready," he said, as though readiness was a thing he had been maintaining. Sunday arrived at 8 with Diana's car in the driveway, and Diana at the door in jeans and a dark pullover and 2 cups of coffee from a place in Atlanta that he had never been to, and would later decide was the best coffee he had ever had. She handed him 1 cup before she said hello, and he accepted it before he said hello, and Darius appeared in the hallway in pajamas and looked at Diana with the frank, complete assessment of a child who has no reason to be anything other than honest. "You're shorter than I thought," Darius said. "Darius," Marcus said. "That's accurate," Diana said. She looked at Darius directly. "You're exactly what I pictured." Darius considered this carefully. "What did you picture?" "Someone who names ducks after people," she said, "and means it as a compliment." Darius's face moved into a slow, real smile, the kind he had inherited from Emma. "It was a compliment," he said. "Diana is a good name." He turned and walked toward the kitchen. "I'll get the flour," he said, like the matter was settled. Like it had been settled for some time, and the adults were simply catching up. Marcus looked at Diana. Diana looked at Marcus. She had both hands around her coffee cup, and her eyes were doing the thing they did when she was not performing anything, when she was just present in the exact room she was in, with the exact people in it. 7-5, she said quietly. "Not about the board, about something else." "I heard," he said. "I want to tell you about the 2 votes," she said. "The ones that went against me." She held his gaze. "Not because it changes anything, because you deserve to know the full number." He held the door open wider. "Come in," he said. She stepped across the threshold into the house that smelled like coffee and Saturday morning, and the particular warmth of a kitchen where a 9-year-old was already pulling flour from the cabinet with the confidence of someone who had been doing this his whole life. Diana Voss, CEO widow. The woman who had built a company alone and defended it alone and sat on a man's lap in an empty pavilion and heard the most honest thing anyone had said to her. In 3 years stepped into Marcus Webb's kitchen, set her coffee on the counter, rolled up her sleeves and said, "Tell me where to start." Darius handed her the measuring cup without looking up. "1 cup," he said, "and wait for the bubbles this time." She laughed, full and real and unguarded the way people laugh when they are not thinking about how they sound. Marcus turned to the stove and felt the thing in his chest that had unlocked Sunday afternoon, open a little further quiet and certain and honest all the way down, like soil that announces itself not by being dramatic about it, but by simply being what it is. Outside the morning was doing what mornings do. The field was there. The work was there. Darius was handing Diana the whisk with the seriousness of a head chef. And Marcus Webb, who had spent 4 years rounding down when he was uncertain, felt for the first time in a long time that the number in front of him was not uncertain at all. It was exactly what it said it was. The pancakes came out right on the 4th batch. Darius graded them an 8 out of 10, which he announced with the solemnity of a federal inspector, and Diana accepted the 8, with both hands around her coffee cup, and the look of someone who had just been handed a significant professional achievement. Marcus watched from the stove, and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that the moment wasn't already saying better without him. After breakfast, Darius went to his room to read. He did not make a production of it. He simply picked up his book, looked at the 2 adults at the kitchen table and said, "I'm going to give you guys some time," with the particular dignity of a 9-year-old who has decided he is being mature. He walked down the hall. His door did not close all the way. Marcus noticed. Diana noticed Marcus notice. She almost smiled. "He's remarkable," she said. "He's Emma," Marcus said. "In every way that matters." Diana set her cup down. She had been holding something since she arrived. He could tell the way you can tell when a person has organized a thing they need to say and is waiting for the right moment to say it. "The 2 votes," she said. "I told you I'd explain them." "You don't have to," he said. "I want to," she said, "because one of them was Margaret Osei, the board chair, and I expected that. Gerald has been working Margaret for 6 months, and Margaret is cautious by nature, and cautious people move toward the familiar when they're uncertain." She paused. The second vote was Thomas Reeves, the independent director. I had spent 2 weeks rebuilding his confidence in my judgment. I thought I had him. She looked at her hands. Gerald showed him a photograph. Marcus went still. "What photograph?" "Sunday afternoon," she said. "In the pavilion. Gerald had someone take a photograph on a phone from the doorway." She kept her voice even. "It showed me sitting across a man's lap at a professional event. That is what it showed. That is all it needed to show." She looked up. Thomas Reeves looked at that photograph, and he looked at the documentation I had prepared, and he told me privately after the vote that he believed my documentation, but that he could not defend the optics of the image to the other members if Gerald chose to escalate. Marcus said nothing for 3 seconds. "He voted against you because of a photograph. He voted against me because of what a photograph implies when it is handed to a man who is already looking for reasons to doubt," she said. "There is a difference." She held his gaze. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. I am not angry about that photograph. I knew Gerald was going to use it the moment he walked out of the pavilion. I knew it before you said what you said." She paused. "What I did not know, what I had not calculated, was that I would not care." He looked at her. "I have spent 3 years calculating every move in that boardroom," she said. "Every word, every gesture, every relationship, every number. And Sunday afternoon in that pavilion, I stopped calculating." She was direct in the way she was always direct, but there was something underneath the directness now that had not been there before, something that had decided to surface. "I stopped because you told me that when you did something, it would be because you wanted to, not because it was useful." She held his gaze. "No one has said anything that honest to me in 3 years, and I sat there in your arms for 8 seconds, thinking that if Gerald Voss was going to take something from me, I would rather he took the truth than something I had manufactured to confuse him." Marcus looked at her for a long time. The kitchen was quiet. Down the hall, Darius's door was still open half an inch. "You lost a vote," he said. "I won 7, she said, "and I am not sure I would trade the 8 seconds for the vote." She looked at him steadily. "Is that reckless?" "Yes," he said. "Are you going to tell me it was a mistake?" He thought about it honestly. "No," he said. She exhaled just slightly, the way a person exhales when they have been holding something they were not sure would be received. "Good," she said, "because I'm not sorry, and I did not want to argue about it." He almost laughed. He felt it in his chest before it reached his face. "Diana," he said. "What?" "The third-party contract review," he said. "Patrick told me it's been filed. Webb & Sons goes through independent procurement from this point forward. Everything documented." "I know," she said. "I filed it myself." He looked at her. "You filed it?" "Before Gerald walked into that boardroom," she said. "Before the vote. I filed it Monday morning at 7:45, 15 minutes before the meeting started." She said it with the particular calm of someone who had thought 3 steps ahead and had not advertised it. "I was not going to let Gerald use your contract as a lever, so I removed the lever." She paused. "The procurement review will take 6 weeks. It will come back clean. And when it does, the contract will be on record as having gone through more scrutiny than any other vendor engagement in Voss Agronomics history." She looked at him. "Gerald cannot touch it." Marcus sat with that for a moment. She had filed the review herself. She had not waited for him to suggest it, had not asked Patrick to arrange it, had not made it a mutual decision that she could later claim credit for. She had done it at 7:45 on a Monday morning before walking into a room where someone was trying to dismantle what she had built, and she had done it not to protect herself, but to protect him. He understood that. He understood it the way he understood soil, not because someone explained it, but because he had spent enough time with his hands in honest ground to know the difference between what covers something and what holds it. "Thank you," he said. "I round up when I protect people I trust," she said. "It is the one place I allow myself to be generous with the numbers." That landed in him somewhere deep and quiet. He did not answer it immediately because it did not need an immediate answer. It needed to sit the way good decisions sit in the part of a person that knows things before the words catch up. Sure. 3 weeks passed. The contract review moved through its process. Marcus drove up to the North Georgia parcels twice, took cores, filed preliminary assessments, wrote reports that said exactly what the numbers said. Diana read every one of them. He knew she read them because on the third report, she sent a text at 11:30 at night that said, "Page 7, footnote 3. You contradicted your own finding from the 2022 Whitmore file, and then cited the discrepancy and explained it. Most people would have buried that." He texted back, "Burying it doesn't make it go away." She took 4 minutes to respond. Then she sent no. "It doesn't. It just makes it someone else's problem later." He thought about that for a long time. He thought it was the most accurate description of dishonesty he had ever heard, and also probably the most accurate description of what Gerald Voss had been doing for 3 years. Showpiece. 4 weeks after the board vote on a Thursday at 6 in the evening, Diana called. Not a text, a call. He was in the truck heading back from the South Carolina remediation site. He answered on the second ring. "Everything okay?" he said, because calls at 6 on a Thursday from Diana meant something had shifted. "Gerald resigned from the board," she said. Marcus pulled the truck to the shoulder of the road. "When?" "This afternoon, effective immediately." Her voice was controlled in the way it got when something significant had happened, and she was still processing the shape of it. He sent a letter to the board chair. He cited irreconcilable differences in strategic vision. He did not mention me by name. A pause. He also withdrew from the family trust oversight. He relinquished his seats on both the board and the trust committee. Another pause. "Patrick called me at 5. I've been sitting with it for an hour." "Why?" Marcus said. "Why now?" She was quiet for a moment. "The procurement review came back," she said, 2 weeks early. Webb & Sons cleared every line of scrutiny without a single flag. Another pause. "Gerald had been telling the board that my judgment in the partnership was compromised. The review said the opposite. It said the partnership was the most rigorously documented vendor engagement in the company's recent history." Her voice shifted just slightly into something less controlled. "When the review came back clean, Gerald had nothing left to build on. Everything he had been constructing for 8 months was resting on the foundation that my judgment was compromised. The review, took the foundation out. Marcus sat on the shoulder of the road in his truck, with the field on one side and the highway on the other, and felt the specific weight of a thing resolving that had been unresolved for a very long time. Not his thing, hers. But he had been standing beside it long enough that the resolution had weight for him too. "How do you feel?" he said. She took a breath. "I feel like I just put down something I have been carrying for 3 years," she said. "And my arms are very tired, and I do not quite know what to do with them yet." A pause. "I feel like I would like to tell you that in person." "Decatur is 90 minutes from Atlanta," he said. "I know where Decatur is, Marcus," she said, and he could hear the almost smile in it. "Come on Sunday," he said. "Darius has been working on the pancake grade. He thinks he can get you to 8.5. Tell him I'll take it," she said. "I'll bring the coffee." "Diana," he said. "What?" "I'm glad the foundation held," he said. "The one you built, not Gerald's." She was quiet for 3 full seconds. "Me too," she said, quiet and real and entirely herself. "Me too." Sunday arrived clean. Diana's car in the driveway at 5 minutes to 8. Darius at the door before she knocked because he had been watching the window for 15 minutes and had not told his father. Marcus heard the door open and heard Darius say, 8.5 is the goal today. "I've been practicing the bubble timing," and heard Diana say, "I watched a video," and heard Darius say, "Videos don't help, only practice helps," with the authority of someone who had learned this empirically. He stood at the stove and listened to his son instruct a CEO on the proper technique for pancake batter, and felt something. He had not felt in 4 years fill the kitchen, the way warmth fills a room, not dramatically, not all at once, just steadily. The way good things come when you stop making them prove themselves first. And Darius graded the pancakes in 8.5. He announced it with his fork still in his hand and his face entirely serious. Diana said, "I'll take it." Darius said, "Next time we're going for 9. Diana said, "What does 9 require?" Darius said without hesitation, "Consistency. You have to do it the same way every time until it's automatic." He picked up his juice. "Dad says that's true for everything, not just pancakes." Marcus looked at the table. Diana looked at Marcus over Darius's head with an expression that was full and unguarded and honest in a way that required no translation. After breakfast, Darius went to the field. He had a standing arrangement with the weekend farmhand to check the East Quarter cores which Marcus had made official last month, because Darius had correctly identified a compaction issue that the hand had missed. He went with his boots on and his notebook in his back pocket and did not look back, which was either giving the adults space again or genuinely more interested in the soil than the kitchen. And with Darius it was probably both simultaneously. Diana and Marcus were at the table with the last of the coffee. The plates were pushed aside. The morning was quiet, in the specific way Sunday mornings are quiet when there is nowhere else to be. "I have a question," Diana said. "Okay," he said. "That night in the pavilion," she said. "When I sat down, when I asked you." She held his gaze. "You held me up. You kept the posture long enough for Gerald to see what he needed to see. And then you told me that when you did something, it would be because you wanted to." She paused. "I have thought about that every day since." Another pause. "Do you want to?" Marcus Webb looked at Diana Voss across his kitchen table on a Sunday morning in Decatur, Georgia, in the house that still smelled like Emma, in the particular way that houses hold the people who loved them. And he understood that she was not asking about the pavilion. She was asking about everything past it, about the Sunday mornings and the North Georgia parcels and the procurement review and the 8 seconds and the 8.5 out of 10 and every honest number that had brought them both to this table. He had spent 4 years rounding down when he was uncertain. He had built his whole professional life on the principle that when the data was unclear, you stated the lower bound, you stated it honestly, and you let the truth of the thing emerge in real time, rather than filling the gap with what you hoped was there. He was not uncertain. "Yes," he said. Simply, completely. The way he said things he meant. Diana looked at him for 3 seconds. Then she stood up, walked around the table, stood in front of him, put both hands on the sides of his face the way she had in the Burlington hallway, and she kissed him. Slow and certain, and without anything to perform for anyone. No Gerald in the doorway. No board vote pending. No professional calculation underneath it. Just a woman who had waited long enough and a man who had finally caught up to what had been in front of him. When it ended, he had his hands on her wrists. Her watch was on the left one, the silver field watch with the canvas strap, the one with James's name engraved on the back. He had noticed it the first night at the summit and had never asked. He asked now. "Tell me about the watch." "Yes." She looked down at it. "James gave it to me the year I signed our first major contract," she said. "He said I needed something on my wrist that reminded me that someone believed in what I was building before anyone else did." She touched the face of it. "I have worn it every day since he died, when I needed to remember that being believed in was possible." She looked up at Marcus. "I still wear it because it's true, and because James would have liked you." She said that last sentence steadily and honestly, the way she said everything that cost her something. He would have liked that you round down. Marcus kept his hands on her wrists. He thought about Emma, about the way Emma used to hold his soil reports up at the kitchen table and say, "Marcus, this is good work. This is real work. Someone is going to read this and know they can trust you." He thought about the Whitmore report and the lost contract and the 2 years it took to rebuild the client base after. He thought about Darius reading the duck book on his nightstand, and the way a 9-year-old had understood something the adults needed the whole story to figure out. He thought about the fact that 2 people who had each built something significant and painful and real alone had ended up at the same kitchen table, because one of them had written the word honest in blue ink at the bottom of a letter, and the other one had read it 3 times. "Emma would have liked that you waited for the bubbles," he said. Diana looked at him for a moment. Then she laughed, full and real, the same laugh he had heard in the conference anteroom, the one that had nothing left to manage. She sat down beside him, not across from him, beside him, and put her coffee cup on the table, and looked out the window toward the field, where a 9-year-old was checking soil cores with a notebook. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Tell me," he said. "I want to." When I wrote that note on the bottom of the letter, she said, "the part about the honest document, I almost didn't write it. I drafted it 4 times. 3 of the drafts were professional, appropriate. The 4th one said what I actually thought." She paused. "I sent the 4th one because I had spent 11 years sending the professional version of everything, and I was tired of it." She looked at him. "I didn't expect it to matter this much. Honest things have a way of mattering more than you plan for them to," he said. She nodded. "Yes," she said, "they do." Outside, Darius's voice carried across the field calling something to the farmhand about the East Quarter. His voice had the particular confidence of a kid who knows what he's looking for and expects to find it. Marcus listened to it and felt the specific fullness of a life that had been broken and rebuilt, and was now on a Sunday morning in October, holding more than he had given it permission to hold. 6 months later in the spring, the North Georgia contracts were fully executed. The South Carolina remediation project was underway. The Alabama parcels had passed their initial certification review. Webb and Sons had gone from a 2-person operation running on determination and soil cores to a 7-person team with a procurement officer and a second truck and a schedule that ran 18 months out. Marcus had hired 2 of the new team members from the same regional summit where he had met Diana because Carla Simmons from Savannah had called 3 months after texting him and said she had 2 people who rounded down and did he need them, and he had said yes before she finished the sentence. Darius turned 10 in March. Diana drove down from Atlanta with a cake she had made herself, which Darius graded a 6 out of 10 on the frosting and a 9 out of 10 on the inside. She accepted both numbers with the same face she used for quarterly earnings. Marcus watched his son grade the CEO's birthday cake with forensic seriousness and thought that this was somehow the most accurate picture of everything that had happened: 2 honest people and a child who refused to round up for anyone, all in the same kitchen on a Tuesday evening in March. After Darius went to bed, Diana and Marcus sat on the back porch. The field was dark. The spring air carried the particular smell of turned earth that Marcus had known his whole life, and that Diana had been learning to love over the months of site visits and early mornings and Saturday walks through the North Georgia parcels, where she still asked specific questions and still wrote the answers in a small notebook she kept in her jacket pocket. "Gerald sent a letter," she said, "to the company. Legal correspondence. He's not contesting anything. He acknowledged the procurement review findings. Formally." She paused. "His lawyer said it was to close out the matter. Patrick says it means Gerald is done." She said it quietly, not triumphantly. 3 years, and it ends with a legal letter on a Tuesday. "Most things end quietly," Marcus said. "The loud ones take longer, but they end the same way." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. They sat in the dark and listened to the fields settle into the night, the way fields do in small sounds, the specific language of living ground going quiet. "Marcus," she said. "Yeah." "I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer the way you answer everything," she said. Rounded down, no optimism bias. "Okay," he said. She lifted her head and looked at him. Her face in the dark was the same face it always was, direct and real and entirely present. "Is this going to hold?" she said. "You and me and Darius and the field and the Sunday pancakes and all of it. Is it going to hold, Joe?" He looked at her for a long time. He thought about soil. He thought about the way you tested ground, not by looking at it from above, not by reading reports someone else had written, but by putting your hands in it, taking a core reading what was actually there. He thought about everything he had tested and everything he had found over the course of a year that had started with an envelope on a kitchen table and ended here, on a back porch in Decatur, with the smell of spring earth and a woman whose head had just been on his shoulder. He rounded down. He checked the number. He checked it again. "Yes," he said. "It's going to hold." She held his gaze for one long beat. Then she nodded once the way she nodded when a number satisfied her, and she leaned her head back onto his shoulder and looked out at the dark field. Marcus Webb. 52 years old widower. Father, a man who had built something honest out of loss and kept it honest through every year that followed, sat on his back porch in the spring and held a woman who had done the same thing in different rooms with different numbers, and understood that the most accurate thing he had ever measured was this: not a soil core, not a remediation timeline, not a contract review that came back clean. This: the weight of another person choosing to be beside you. The specific, unambiguous, fully documented truth of it. He did not need to round down on that. The number was exactly right. And some numbers, once you find them, you do not let go.